California employers will pay $4.4 million more towards workers' compensation fraud fight next year. The Fraud Assessment Commission on Wednesday set the fiscal year 2007-2008 assessment at $43,887,233, an 11.2% increase over the current year assessment of $39,479,534. This money pays for investigations and prosecutions of workers' compensation fraud cases by the Department of Insurance Fraud Division and county district attorney offices. Prosecutors asked for even more, saying that their efforts to arrest claimants, employers, and medical providers played some part in the 59% reduction in pure premium rates since 2003. Representatives from district attorneys' offices around the state attended the meeting to present their budget plans for the next year. Wait a cotton-picking minute. Something's missing from their report. The word insurers. Where does the money come from for investigations and prosecutions of insurers, insurance companies who commit fraud against the injured worker and society itself? Oh, wait a minute. According to the Fraud Assessment Commission chairman, Mr. William Zachary, who's a professional risk manager for Safeway stores, they don't go after insurers who violate the law. Which brings me to this editorial from a very knowledgeable and respected voice in the workers' compensation community. It's entitled Workers' Compensation Fraud, Stop the Hypocrisy by David J. DiPaolo. Note that David J. DiPaolo is the president and CEO of WorkCompCentral.com, a web-based subscription news site that deals with everything workers' compensation in California. David is also an attorney and has been a member of the California Bar since 1985. He's a graduate of the Pepperdine University School of Law. It seems that fraud and workers' compensation just belong together. The sad part is that those who commit the most heinous criminal acts and cause the greatest civil damage always seem to be just out of reach of the long arm of the law. What's worse is that we as an industry not only seem ambivalent against this criminal behavior, some even seem to condone it. Just last week, it was revealed that State Fund Board Chairwoman Jeannie Kane told the Los Angeles Times that SCIF directors Frank Del Rey and Kent Dagg stepped down following questions about whether their membership on the board was appropriate, while the two operated businesses that collected millions of dollars in fees from the fund. This news, by the way, is nothing new. Our own Jim Sams uncovered that story years ago. But after the director of that inquiry, John Dunlap, resigned, Sams didn't think newcomers would have the chutzpah to actually do it again, or that our esteemed Governor Schwarzenegger would overlook obvious conflicts of interest in making appointments. It seems that Jim Sams was wrong. The pervasive greed of those feeding off the workers' compensation gravy train is so endemic that there's no sanctity, no island of honesty, not one bit of redemption that any amount of reform or public humiliation can rectify. The brokerage community has been successful for many years in steering the fraud debate towards the most minuscule part of fraud, injured workers, a segment of the fraud population that is so small that insurance companies comically seek big attention for thwarting a criminal act that typically does not amount to more than $10,000 in damage. Where there is an outcry, however, brokers suck $4 billion out of a system on clever reinsurance chicanery so that they can make $500 million in fees? Why isn't the employer's fraud task force and other self-appointed overseers of malicious intent and do-gooders directing their energies towards identification of the white-collar criminals guilty of bid rigging? Where are our district attorneys whose offices are flush with workers' compensation fraud fighting money when clear evidence of outright insurance company misreporting of work comp premium occurs? Is Elliot Spitzer, former New York's Attorney General, and now that state's governor, the only politician who seems to be bothered by the large-scale white-collar crime? Why is it that nobody gives a damn in this industry about big money fraud? I am sick and tired of the self-congratulatory insurance company press releases boasting about small-time fraud busts. SCIF, State Compensation Insurance Fund, is ironically guilty of this media puffery. I am sick and tired of employers blaming injured workers for their skyrocketing insurance premiums, when typically the blame, more often than not, should be directed at recalcitrant brokers. Milking a commission schedule because of underregulation. I'm sick and tired of lawmakers putting the blame on physicians, the vast majority of whom are just trying to do their job in the practice of medicine, when they appoint criminals to public oversight positions. I'm sick and tired of a paralyzed legislature and executive branch who would prefer to stick their heads in the sand while a major economic force in this state is allowed to be controlled and perverted to serve the interests of big East Coast financial conglomerates. But mostly I'm sick and tired of us in the industry putting up with this crap. The news of this scandal and follow-up stories barely registered in the top 30% of all news published on Work Comp Central for the month. In fact, some comments made about the story were indicative not only of apathy but virtual acceptance, as if it were okay to rip off the system if you have a white collar on. I'm ashamed of our industry. I'm ashamed that we view this behavior with ambivalence. I'm ashamed that we tolerate such wrongful behavior. To make matters worse, the laws we have in place, and which would seem to give our law enforcement agencies the ability to seek redress, simply seem to be another excuse to grab money. For instance, in 2004, the California State Auditor issued a scathing report stating that the $30 million collected from employers each year to fight fraud is wasted, and that Department of Insurance is doing a terrible job combating fraud. And the recent SCIF debacle is a glaring example of the hypocrisy that predominates the enforcement of our workers' compensation fraud laws and the perversity of a system that is apparently without a moral rudder. It seems to me that Misters Del Rey and Dagg are likely in violation of Labor Code Section 3820. That section applies across the board to any person or entity who willfully misrepresents any fact in order to obtain workers' compensation insurance at less than the proper rate, or knowingly assist, abet, solicit, or conspire with any person who engages in an unlawful act under this section. Will anybody prosecute this duo for their self-interested manipulations? Probably not. Does anyone care? From what I'm reading so far, probably not. The Schwarzenegger administration has bled all they could out of injured workers and doctors. The same administration put Del Rey and Dagg in a position of abuse. The outrage of the community should be heard all the way to Attorney General-elect Jerry Brown's office, calling for a high-level investigation, criminal prosecution, and civil penalties against some of the biggest frauds in the history of California workers' compensation. If we're going to fix workers' compensation, fix it all the way around. Stop the hypocrisy. David, thank you for having the cojones to write that. I'm Sam Gold.